Your legs are caked in mud and your nose is running faster than you. Then, get that heating on. You deserve it. Thanks to Hive Active Heating, you can control your heating wherever you are with a tap of the app, which could save you up to £120 a year by never having to heat an empty home. Buy today and get a free Amazon Echo Dot. Search Hive Heating. Hive services require broadband and Wi-Fi. Terms apply.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
You're listening to Bloomberg Radio. A reminder, Michael Bloomberg, a Democratic presidential candidate, is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, parent of Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update. Now the news.
Japanese officials have confirmed 99 more people infected by the new virus aboard the quarantine cruise ship Diamond Princess. More than 450 of the passengers are currently in quarantine. We get more from correspondent Lucy Kafanov.
We are now learning that 99 new people had tested positive for coronavirus on board the Diamond Princess, bringing the total number of infected passengers to 456. That is more than 10% of the population on board.
More than 300 Americans from that same ship are back in the U.S. 14 of them have tested positive for the virus. India's Supreme Court today ruled in favor of equal rights in the armed forces, ordering the government to grant permanent commission and command to women officers on a par with men. Former South African President F.W. de Klerk apologizes and has withdrawn a statement that the country's former system of apartheid was not a crime against humanity.
Welcome back to this special President's Day edition of Bloomberg Daybreak. Markets are closed for the holiday. I'm Nathan Hager, and we wrap up this hour with a look at the U.S. economy and monetary policy for the rest of the year. Here with us to do that, Yelena Shulyacheva, senior U.S. economist for Bloomberg Economics, along with Bloomberg chief U.S. economist Carl Riccadonna. Good, as always, to talk with you both, even though don't have a whole heck of a lot of data for the data-dependent Fed to look at this week. So, Yelena, what's on your radar?
Well, just continue to monitor what kind of an impact from the latest coronavirus or from the recent Boeing production halt we are going to see in the first half of the year. So these things are really worth monitoring because they seem to be are going to have quite a large impact on economic growth in the first half of the year. So particularly Boeing story is going to be front and center.
You mentioned coronavirus, and that obviously is something that the Federal Reserve itself has pointed to as a potential downside risk in its latest policy report, a monetary policy report. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell addressed that in remarks to Congress last week. Here's some of what he had to say.
Some of the uncertainties around trade have diminished recently, but risks to the outlook remain. In particular, we are closely monitoring the emergence of the coronavirus, which could lead to disruptions in China that spill over to the rest of the global economy.
Carl Riccadonna, what kind of spillover effects are you looking for potentially from this?
Well, given the extent of anecdotal reporting about factories delaying restarts after the Lunar New Year or being on hold for much longer times as the supply chains are disrupted, the question I'm grappling with is potentially whether the impact of coronavirus and all of the echoing supply chain issues could actually be more severe than what we saw from the trade war in 2019. So certainly our economics team in China is meaningfully downgrading their growth forecast to about 4.5% growth in the first quarter, but they're keeping a watchful eye that maybe they'll have to cut the estimates even further. Here in the U.S., we're not seeing that much impact yet in the data, and certainly equity markets are reflecting that kind of positive sentiment that this will be a contained event, but we have to be very fluid as we evaluate the situation. And so this could certainly blow over, but this could create the kind of supply chain disruptions that would force the Fed unwillingly in an election year to have to actually step into the picture and add a bit more accommodation.
And something else we've heard from the Trump administration, Yelena, is that this has the potential to make it more difficult for China to meet its obligations under the Phase 1 trade agreement. Is that something else that you're looking at that could potentially have a spillover effect?
Absolutely. So, reaching the deal was one thing, but obviously implementing it is another thing. And just a month after the deal was reached, we're already talking about risks that this deal will not be fulfilled. And there's some sympathy from the administration, I think, and we heard from a bunch of officials that that might be a reason that China will not be able to meet the goals. But I think we doubted this from the very beginning without even a virus. The goals were very ambitious from the start. So this kind of gives, both sides some sort of an excuse not to meet the goals.
So the administration may show some sympathy for not hitting those quotas. However, the Rust Belt, which is so important to the presidential election come November 3rd, may be less willing to let it slide because we're looking at a factory sector that really, we could argue, has been in a recession since early last year. And so the economic health in those key industrial states, the swing states that put Trump in the White House in the first place, places like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, those states are not seeing the same type of strong economy as more service sector oriented states, and not fulfilling the Phase 1 trade agreement is just going to further weigh on economic conditions in those regions.
And adding to that weight, Yelena, something you mentioned earlier, the continued delay in production for Boeing. Is that going to be an overhang that outlasts the potential of coronavirus to affect the U.S. economy?
So the way we look at this is that might have a much larger impact on economic growth in the first half of the year than the blow from the coronavirus. So if the impact already was evident in the numbers in the second half of last year as shipments of Boeing aircraft actually were smaller than average over the previous few months. But as production halt started this year, inventories accumulation is going to shrink as well, and that will have a much more pronounced impact on growth in the first quarter of this year. Having said that, and Jerome Powell in his testimony also mentioned it, the impact will be quite large, but it will be a temporary one. So once production resumes and Boeing starts adding to inventories, we will see an impact, a positive impact to economic growth in the second half of the year.
You mentioned the R word, Carl, a minute ago. When it comes to industrial sector of the economy, what's your outlook for recession more broadly?
Well, certainly the coronavirus is the unknown issue here. If we're taking coronavirus out of the equation and looking at an economy that is growing at a pace that's strong enough to avoid the economy just dying of natural causes. Often if we slow below about 1.5% GDP growth, that often is slow enough that the economy does cave in on itself. We're not there yet. Consumer fundamentals look decent. The unemployment rate lowest since basically the Vietnam draft was in effect. That's giving some pressure on wages, and a little bit of wage pressure for consumers gives them a lot of buying power over the next several quarters. So I think that the recession risk is relatively low. I would put it in the vicinity of about 15%. But certainly if we're looking at supply chain disruptions and a worsening of these halting of flights and whatnot, then that could be something that would push us more aggressively. But as we think about going back to the Fed, right, if it's just stubbornly low inflation and a cool economy, the Fed really doesn't want to be in play in an election year. And so I think that at earliest they wait until after the election and in December take action, or sometime next year. If we're talking about a coronavirus, much worse situation, that is something they could actually convince the Fed to move shortly before the election. If we look back over history, generally, whatever the Fed's kind of doing in the first half of the year is what they're doing on election day. So if they were in a long and gradual cycle of either raising or cutting rates, they would continue through the election, but they don't like to stop or start just ahead of voters heading to the polls.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, how much of an outlier would it be for the Fed to make a move in an election year when you have something like the coronavirus that potentially acts as a catalyst, Jelena?
Well, I think it would be very unusual. As Carl mentioned, this is very unusual for the Fed to change the direction of policy, even though they can continue to make adjustments. For now, they're on hold, and they would prefer to remain on hold. But if the push comes to shove, they will not hesitate to act to ensure that economic growth continues.
In other words, they won't sit on their hands and risk the economy slipping into recession. They would grudgingly go into play, even though the messaging at the end of last year and even at present continues to be that the Fed feels they have policy on an accommodative setting, which means that the economy can endure some unforeseen headwinds without the Fed have to actually adjust the policy response. They're not neutral. They've got their foot on the accelerator, so a little bit of a stiffening headwind. The economy should be able to take it in stride, but again, a little bit, not a lot.
Does the Fed have room to make a move in an election year on the balance sheet, Carl?
Well, they could certainly adjust balance sheet policy, and I think that more importantly, they're using interest rates as the key lever. So what they're trying to do at the moment is increase their holdings of Treasury bills, which are short-term, short-duration assets, to alleviate that kind of funding stresses in the wholesale funding market, the repo issues. So by increasing T-bills, then those repo issues should fade into the background. But in terms of balance sheet policy, they're going to go with the interest rate lever first until they've exhausted that. Doesn't mean QE couldn't be in the picture, but they'll push interest rates close to zero before they would consider QE. And again, QE in an election year would be a politically fraught development, to be sure.
So you guys don't see the moves that the Fed's making in the repo market as QE at this point?
Absolutely not. We should. That's kind of like adding oil to the engine to alleviate friction and overheating. It's not adding more fuel, which is what quantitative easing does.
Our view is that, as Carl mentioned, that the first thing they will do in case of a slowdown, a significant slowdown, is they will cut rates, but they will not touch the balance sheet or even, there's some discussion about negative rates. That is not happening in the United States either.
Our thanks to Yelena Sholyecheva, senior U.S. economist for Bloomberg Economics, as well as Carl Riccadonna, chief U.S. economist for Bloomberg. And that wraps up this holiday edition of Bloomberg Daybreak. Thank you for being with us. We invite you to join us again tomorrow at 5 a.m. Wall Street time for Bloomberg Daybreak. It is 57 minutes past the hour. I'm Nathan Hager, and this is Bloomberg.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL Scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Stace, are you ready yet?
Have you seen the Butlins lineup? I was born ready. We're going big tonight. Raxu then Brainiac live.
Those experiments will blow the boys' socks off.
They're wearing flip-flops, Joe, not socks.
Oh, dance shoes tomorrow though for the Diversity Dance Academy. I am going to throw some shapes.
Are you sure about that?
Well, it's a lot easier when you're not on ice.
Well, if anyone could teach you to dance, it's going to be Diversity. Come on, we're going to be late.
For an exciting family break to Butlins this Easter, book online now. Are you ready to Butlins?
Are you sitting comfortably? Is your roof cascading light in the space around you? Loving that feeling as you glide over a bumpy road? If you are, you're almost certainly experiencing the advanced comfort of a Citroën SUV. If you're not, take one for a comfort drive. A test drive, but way more comfortable. Citroën C3 Aircross and C5 Aircross SUV range. Now with £500 off list price and 3 year 0% APR finance. Ooh la la! Citroën. Citroën UK Limited, acting as a credit broker, not a lender. Conditional sale. Terms, eligibility criteria and conditions apply. Guarantee may be required. PSA Finance UK Limited, participating dealer stock vehicles ordered between the 3rd and the 29th of February and registered by 31st of March.
Winter joggers of London, it's chilly. Your legs are caked in mud and your nose is running faster than you. Then, get that heating on. You deserve it. Thanks to Hive Active Heating, you can control your heating wherever you are with a tap of the app, which could save you up to £120 a year by never having to heat an empty home. Buy today and get a free Amazon Echo Dot. Search Hive Heating. Hive services require broadband and Wi-Fi. Terms apply.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now a global news update.
Still in quarantine. Weapons ban fails. I'm Mike Moss.
Like an episode of The Twilight Zone inside an episode of The Outer Limits in a painting by Salvador Dali.
American Matthew Smith has decided to remain on the quarantine cruise ship Diamond Princess in Yokohama, Japan, rather than leave with 300 other Americans who've been evacuated.
Because you can't ever imagine anything like this, and you feel light years away from 2 weeks ago when you were here on a luxury cruise.
But Smith says he trusts the Japanese quarantine and thinks he's getting better care in his cabin on the ship than he'll get back in the U.S. where the others have been taken. Correspondent Lucy Kafanov reports those Americans are in a 14-day quarantine.
For more than 300 American citizens who had been trapped on that Diamond Princess cruise ship, the nightmare is nearly over. The second charter plane touched down at the Texas military base, the first one landing right here at the Travis Air Force Base around 11 p.m. local time.
14 of those Americans back in the U.S. have tested positive for the virus. Virginia Governor Ralph Northam's push to ban the sale of assault weapons has failed after members of his own party balked at the proposal. Senators voted to shelve the bill for the year and asked the State Crime Commission to study it. Another 2 inches of rain or more is forecast for the South this week, and meteorologist Gene Norman reports the ground is already saturated.
Over the last 30 days, there are parts of the South that have seen over a foot of rain. So the last thing they need is more rain, but that's in the forecast for the next couple of days. It won't be coming in all at once at waves, but every bit will add up.
The price of wine expected to drop to its lowest level in 5 years, thanks in part to a surplus of California grapes combined with a decreased demand for wine. Drinkers can expect to get better value for every drop. The cheaper prices may even last up to 3 years. I'm Mike Moss.
Here is some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or if you signed up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called MediShare. It's the affordable alternative to health insurance, and it's worked beautifully for 25 years. They have more than 400,000 members now around the country. MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing ministry, and over the years, members have shared over $3 billion of each other's medical bills, so they could help share your needs too. And best of all, You could save a lot of money with MediShare. The typical savings for a family is about $500 a month. Your savings could be more or less, but think about what you could do with that extra money every month. You're not stuck with a high-cost health plan. You can join MediShare anytime, so call them today and check it out. Here's the number to find out more, and there's no pressure. They are super easy to talk to. Call 844-91-BIBLE. That's 844-91-BIBLE. 844-91-BIBLE.
Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred is defending his decision not to punish individual Houston Astros players over a 2017 sign-stealing scandal, saying he had to offer some players immunity in order to be able to get enough information to conduct the investigation. But Manfred is still being questioned about whether the players wore electronic cheating devices.
I think in my own mind, it was hard for me to figure out why they would tell us, given that they were immune, why they would be truthful, admit they did the wrong thing in 17, admit they did the wrong thing in 18, and then lie about what was going on in 19. Now, can I tell you I'm 100% sure about that? You're never 100% sure in any of these things, but that was my best judgment.
With the coronavirus in Japan continuing to spread every day, McDonald's, Starbucks, and other fast food companies are ramping up what they call contactless pickup and delivery to keep their workers and customers safe.
I'm Mark Mills in the Bloomberg Radio Newsroom. Wall Street had the day off in observance of President's Day. European stocks advanced after Chinese shares gained, with investors getting a lift after China's central bank unveiled plans to reduce corporate taxes and fees to help combat the coronavirus outbreak. In London, the FTSE 100 gaining about 0.33%. The DAX in Germany up about 0.3%. The CSI 300 in China gaining 2.25%. Japan's Nikkei fell 0.7% after data showed the country's economy shrank last quarter by more than 6%, the biggest drop in 5 years. International Monetary Fund Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva told Bloomberg Television that the most likely scenario for the coronavirus would be relatively rapid containment, followed by economic recovery.
We are still hoping that the most likely scenario would be relatively rapid containment of the virus, a V-shape drop in economic activities in China, some impact on the rest of the world, and then very fast recovery.
Tensions increased between the U.S. and NATO allies on Sunday when U.S. Ambassador to Germany Richard Grenell tweeted that President Trump had instructed him to make clear that any nation who chooses to use an untrustworthy 5G vendor risks jeopardizing intelligence and sharing with the U.S. at the highest level. The comment on Twitter seems specifically aimed at Huawei Technologies, although Grenell did not mention the Chinese company by name. As we've been reporting, General Motors will leave Australia, New Zealand, and Thailand by year-end as it exits poor-performing markets and focuses on new technologies such as self-driving cars and electric vehicles. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Mark Mills. This is Bloomberg.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio, I'm Charlie Pellet. On this holiday edition of Bloomberg Best for Monday, February 17th, 2020, we'll hear some of Carlyle Group co-founder David Rubenstein's most influential conversations from Rubenstein's Bloomberg television program, Peer-to-Peer Conversations. This hour, we hear from Bank of America Chairman and CEO Brian Moynihan on his efforts to transform the firm into the largest consumer bank in the United States. Plus, Dangote Group founder, president, and CEO Aliko Dangote. He'll talk about his path to becoming the largest cement manufacturer in sub-Saharan Africa. Brian Moynihan is the chairman and CEO of Bank of America. In his 10 years of leadership, Bank of America has become the country's premier consumer and commercial bank. Moynihan said Rubenstein, co-founder of the Carlyle Group and host of the Bloomberg television show Peer-to-Peer Conversations, to discuss his path to becoming CEO and his firm's succession plans.
Let's talk about your career at Bank of America and how you rose up and how you actually became the CEO, because I think it's quite interesting. So to go back to your background, you're from Ohio?
Yes.
And your father was a chemist?
My father was a chemist, yeah.
And was it DuPont? Or?
DuPont, yeah.
Okay, so you are the sixth of 8 children.
Right.
And when you have 8 children, I guess you share a lot and so forth?
Well, you make sure you have to be very aggressive of at least getting your share, let's say that.
Okay. So you went to Brown University, and you were the co-captain of the rugby team.
Right.
So rugby is a tough sport. I assume that's not as tough as banking, or banking tougher than rugby?
Yeah, there's nothing more powerful to see one of those scrums push. And I was never in there because I wasn't big enough, but to direct that, which was one of my roles I played on the team, it's a fantastic, teamwork game. And I think that's the consistent. You learn the teamwork. All 15 players participate fully in rugby. It's a different kind of game.
Did you ever break any bones or anything?
I got knocked out once by my own teammate, which irritated me because I was ready to score and the guy kicked me in the head on my way to the goal.
Okay. So you graduated and you went to law school at Notre Dame?
Correct, yeah. Played rugby there, too.
You played rugby there, too. So where were you more of a star, at Notre Dame or at Brown?
I don't know where I was a star, but we had fun at Notre Dame playing, too.
You then went back to Rhode Island, practiced law.
Yep.
And you were a corporate lawyer or?
Corporate securities, M&A, private equity deals.
The highest calling of mankind, private equity, right?
It's interesting because one of the reasons why I quit being a lawyer was I had worked with our private equity firm, the private equity firm the company owned called Fleet Equity, which became Nautic now, and I structured deals with them, and that's what sort of led the CEO at the time, Terry Murray, saying, come work with us, quit being a lawyer outside, and I went to work with them.
So Fleet was an acquisitive bank, and it ultimately did a merger with Bank Boston, is that right? Then you stayed with the combined company, and then when the CEO of Bank Boston took over, Chad Gifford, he ultimately decided the combined bank wasn't big enough, and so he ultimately discussed selling it to a number of other people, and ultimately it was bought by Bank of America, is that right?
Right, and that goes to the scale of banking and what you could achieve. It was ultimately the first nationwide bank, and that's something that we have that no one else has right now.
When Bank of America came in, what was your job in the new bank company?
I had the wealth management businesses, so Columbia Asset Management, the brokerage business, the private banking business. So I had a group of businesses called GWIM, most people call it Global Wealth Investment Management.
And then for a while you became the general counsel of the entire Bank of America?
For 40 days.
40 days.
Yeah.
And
from December of 2008 to January of 2009, so it was 40 days.
40 days and 40 nights, and was there a flood or anything? Nothing.
Well, there was the Merrill transaction and a few other things. Okay. So the second round of TARP and a few other gems. But
okay, by that time, the United States was in the middle of a financial crisis. All banks were in trouble, I think it's fair to say. Bank of America was doing a favor, I guess, for the United States government when it was told it should buy Merrill Lynch. Is that right?
There was a scramble going on to try to stabilize the firms that were less stable. J.P. Morgan, Bear Stearns, ourselves with Merrill Lynch, etc. And we couldn't stabilize Lehman, and we even looked at it as a company.
But at one point, the CEO of Bank of America was leaving, and they needed to get a new CEO. And how did they pick you? You were the general counsel.
At that time, I wasn't. So I was general counsel for a short period of time. Then after that, I had to run and had the brokerage business, the commercial banking business, and the investment banking business. But I couldn't keep a job for a while there. Let's just say that. I had probably 5 jobs in a year, but because largely we were doing deals and things were shifted around, and it was a little interesting. But Ken Lewis, the CEO, told the board he wanted to leave at year-end, and they went through a search process. It was something I've told our board I'll never leave you in the position to have to do. So I owe them a successor at all times, not only now, but also sometime in the future. And it was a relatively difficult process for all involved. And then mid-December, they finally concluded that I'd be CEO, and I've been CEO since January 1st to 10.
So since you've now been running it for almost 10 years, the market capitalization is up about 54%. Stock price is up about 76%. So what did you do that made these events happen and make Bank of America now the largest consumer bank in the United States?
Well, it was a fairly straightforward thing, and there was some additive stuff that made it a little more interesting. But basically, it was to pare the company back to what made it great. And what makes it great is the 8 lines of business and the simplicity of that. And so we got rid of about 40 different units that we didn't need. We got out of businesses like outside the United States wealth management business, which we didn't make any money on. The issue that got in the middle of that made it more interesting, I said, was that the defaults and mortgages kept building. And so taking care of that issue was unique. And the question was, you just had to take that stuff and get it away. And the vision was to have,
everything a customer, a company, or an institutional investor needs. But keep it to that and not get into stray business. Like we had $70 billion of funded private equity investments when I took over. We have probably less than $1 billion now or $2 billion.
You can't have too many funded private equity
But that's your
investments,
business.
in my view.
That's your business. Our job is to help you do it, not to be competitive. And those are major changes.
That's Bank of America Chairman and CEO Brian Moynihan speaking with David Rubenstein. Coming up, we'll continue the conversation and hear about Warren Buffett's decision to invest in Bank of America during the 2008 financial crisis. This is Bloomberg.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. They get a lot of attention when they want to buy a big company, but when Google, Facebook, Apple, or other tech giants purchased hundreds of small startups over the last decade, no one said much. Now the Federal Trade Commission wants to know.
Are we seeing that Facebook is constantly buying up young competitors and then immediately shutting them down? Are they constantly acquiring companies and taking all the data and not disclosing that?
Bloomberg's Kurt Wagner says the FTC will have plenty to look at. Apple alone has acquired hundreds of companies since 2010, most of them focused on technologies to be used in its devices. When the iPhone maker revamped its Maps app, it bought lesser knowns including Embark, Locationary, Broadmap, Hotstop.com, and others. Those deals are the focus now, but other parts of big tech's businesses could also come under more scrutiny down the road.
This is a small step in what is probably a much larger journey that they're going to be on over the next 5 to 10 years.
Elisa Parenti, Bloomberg Radio.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the U-Switch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see 3 men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, work from home on a Friday jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, Soho jobs, Shoreditch jobs. Keep me away from the central line jobs. Banking jobs, building jobs, never ever boring jobs. Small jobs, big jobs, lunch in Borough Market jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Pancake Day is flipping fun. Pancake Day is Stella. This day will be a yummy one, 'cause pancakes love Nutella.
Pancake Day is nearly here. Gather friends and family to enjoy some delicious pancakes on Tuesday, the 25th of February. And don't forget, pancakes love Nutella.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio, this is Bloomberg Best. Let's continue the conversation between Carlyle Group co-founder David Rubenstein and Bank of America Chairman and CEO Brian Moynihan. Here they discuss the 2008 financial crisis and Warren Buffett's decision to invest in Bank of America.
Before you were the CEO, the bank made an investment in Countrywide. and then they made an acquisition of Countrywide, and ultimately it turned out to cost the bank maybe $50 billion or something like that. So maybe one of the worst acquisitions in the financial services world for quite some time. So they got in trouble Countrywide because of subprime mortgages, among other problems. Are you making a lot of subprime mortgages today? Is the bank doing that?
The reality is what we were 20% of the mortgage market, of which about 15% of it was done through other people, brokers and correspondents. We don't do any of that anymore. So the only way a person gets a mortgage loan at Bank of America is sitting in front of a Bank of America teammate or digitally directly with us. We don't buy mortgages from other people. That's left us with about 5% of the market. And so it's a much more stable environment.
Okay. Today the bank's future looks very strong, but at all times it wasn't so wonderful. And at one point during the crisis, the bank needed some more money, and you had to go call a man named Warren Buffett. Was that easy to make that call? And did he say anything you want, any terms you want is fine, or how did that work?
No, Warren called us.
Oh, he did.
So he called, and this story I've heard from Warren, but as far as I know, he called and he got into the call centers and asked to speak to me. And of course, they don't transfer everybody that calls the call centers to the CEO's line.
How did they get hold of you?
And so he found one of our investment bankers. They worked with the CFO at Berkshire, and they called, and I talked to him. And he basically said, Brian, I want to make an investment in your company. And I said to him, we don't need the capital. He said, I know, that's why I'm calling. You need stability, you need an imprimatur, and the capital will do you good. And that was in 2011 when the world was kind of interesting because, remember, the government was almost going to default. You had real uncertainty about the litigation risk around the industry, mortgage industry, and he put the money in. And from that day forward, the company, my teammates went back to work the next day saying the smartest investor in the world put $5 billion overnight in this company. He literally called me. I talked to him first time in my life on Monday at 11, and we had the agreement signed on Tuesday by 8 or 9 a.m., and we had the money by Thursday. And so he does that. Now, the interesting thing is if you're a common shareholder and bought that day, you would have fared as well as he did. It's just you had to have the courage, and he had $5 billion at a time when other people didn't have it.
So he bought stock at a time when the stock was less than half of where it is now, I assume.
Yeah, it was. His conversion price was $7.14. That was like 15-20%.
Okay, so if I had some extra money today and I wanted to buy stock in the bank, should I buy your bank stock and Bank of America? Would I do well?
You would do well. You would do well. I mean, we have the best franchise across all the businesses and financial services in the largest economy in the world, the United States, and around the world. We have the top 2 or 3 franchises dealing with the companies of global companies. So what more would you want to invest in?
But during the Great Recession, you spent a lot of time in Washington, more than probably you wanted to, and you very often testified and so forth. Do you think that the attitude towards banks today in Washington is more favorable than it was when the Great Recession was going on?
I think the attitude towards banks generally is more favorable because, in the end of the day, America's prospered, the economy's growing, unemployment's low, and that's a better backdrop than severe delinquency in homes and housing and the unemployment at 10%. Our brand's at an all-time high. Our customer service scores are an all-time high. Our growth is actually exceeding the industry, and so those are all very good things for a company. But that was built through a lot of tactics we took. But the general atmosphere is better, largely because people see that we're out there trying to help.
I think it's fair to say that the banks were beaten up by the regulators and Congress, and ultimately the Dodd-Frank legislation was passed. Do you think the Dodd-Frank legislation is working, or would you modify it a bit?
The banking industry self-insures itself. And so if you're actually an insured depository institution with insured deposits, it's a cooperative. So when a bank fails, we pay 15% of it. And so we have a high interest in having the safest industry. What happens in times is you see the activities leak outside the industry. And that's what really the problem was. So most of the major issues were companies that weren't covered by the core regulatory umbrella. Dodd-Frank changed that. That is a very good thing because now they have purview over the whole industry. Now we still struggle. Half the mortgage business is not in the banking system today. And when it was not before, that gave rise to Countrywide and some other gems. So, I think overall Dodd-Frank is corrected a lot of the issues. The question is, underneath it, there's pieces like the Volcker Rule, which people talk about, that sort of swung in a direction. You're saying, I don't think that's what they were trying to do, and we're trying to get them more rational. But the capital, liquidity, most importantly, the stress test, those regimes are critical. And the reason why the U.S. banking system is strong and active and growing and supporting the economy, and other banking systems aren't, because we got to it.
Today, there are 4 big banks in the United States: Citicorp, J.P. Morgan, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America. Do you think that's a good thing to have only 4 big banks that are based in the United States, or do you think it's working okay?
I think it works well, but I think there's a a large amount of the industry is in the hands of a lot of other. There's 5,000 banks and there's community banks. So you really have a much more varied financial industry. And so one of the things that makes our industry strong is the variety of participants. We have the largest market share, along with those colleagues. But if you actually look at us as a percentage of the GDP relative to other countries, this is completely unconsolidated business. We have the largest retail share, and we think we're about 15%. If we were Coke or Pepsi, we think that's not very good market share, right? So there's a lot of room to go to grow here still.
What percentage of your profits or revenues are from outside the United States? Is it a large percentage?
About 15 to 20%.
And are you reasonably happy with that, or you think that's where your expansion can come?
Well, we're expanding outside the United States, and so we have a business which is in all the major trading venues, which is doing capital markets and trading for the big asset managers and other firm, and we have a company that does corporate and commercial banking, investment banking, and treasury services around the world. And we're investing tremendously in those by adding people. It doesn't mean you have to make acquisitions. You're just adding more and more people and the opportunities, in whether it's in Asia or whether it's Latin America, whether it's Middle East or wherever, Europe, etc. We can grow because basically the connectivity of the 2,000 or 3,000 largest companies, and then secondly the connectivity of mid-sized U.S. companies, which we're the largest provider of services to around the world in the supply chains and everything. It needs people like us, and we are happy to do it to help them transact and engage in trade and import, export, all that stuff. And it's a great business.
In the old days, 20 years ago or so, if I wanted to get some cash, I would take out my checkbook. I'd go to a bank, I'd write out a check, and they probably would cash it if they could make sure I had enough money in the account. Do you really need banks, physical banks these days? How many people actually walk in and cash checks that way?
The numbers are surprisingly
How many
large.
physical facilities do you actually
we have 4,300 branches today.
4,300.
At the highest point, we were probably 6,100. And you have to be high touch and high tech. In those branches, over the next 24 hours, about 800,000 people will come in. But during the course of last quarter, meaning second quarter, I think we had 1.4 billion consumer interactions, and 1.3 of them were digital.
That's Bank of America Chairman and CEO Brian Moynihan speaking with David Rubenstein. Coming up, we'll hear from Dangote Group founder, president, and CEO Aliko Dangote. This is Bloomberg.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires. Which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Why has J.D. Power ranked you? Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients, and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us number 1 in client support, number 1 in firm leadership, number 1 in operational support, number 1 in compensation, number 1 in professional development support, and number 1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/award.
Vodafone 5G will have the power to change your world. From driverless cars to virtual reality and real-time gaming. That's why we're rolling out 5G in London and across the UK. Discover Vodafone 5G on the UK's best mobile data network. The future's exciting. Ready? Vodafone.
NPerf testing awarded Vodafone Best 2019 Mobile Internet Performance based on 35,664 tests on the NPerf app in the UK. Coverage may vary. Visit vodafone.co.uk.
It might still be cold and dark outside, but at least a new phone can brighten things up. You can get an epic iPhone 8 with a 12-megapixel camera at an epic price. At Tesco Mobile, you can get the iPhone 8 for only $19.99 a month. That's a saving of £90. So go in-store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 23rd of February, saving £2.50 per month over 36 months. Was £22.49. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements required. Subject to status phase. Policy applies. See tescomobile.com/terms.
Good morning. This is your Southern service to London Victoria. Join in our onboard quiz. Here's our next clue. What sea sounds like a handheld party food but keeps you dry and protected from the rain? Not canapes, canopies.
At Southern Railway, we're investing over £7 million into making improvements for you, like canopies, cycle parking and new platform lighting across more of our stations. Find out more and book your tickets at southernrailway.com. Southern Railway, we're with you.
Major League Baseball is back. Are you ready to unlock the 2020 season with TuneIn Premium?
And this one is gone! It hits the foul pole!
Be there from day one with every single game of spring training, rivalry games, split squads, Cactus League, Grapefruit League. TuneIn Premium has it all. Then, when the pitch count starts for real, experience live and on-demand access to every game, everywhere you go, from opening day to the World Series. Don't miss out on the action. Search Premium to upgrade today.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit tunein.com/premium to upgrade.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live. From Los Angeles, I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn. The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most.
During bankruptcy, it has $250 million in financing. I'm Mike Moss.
And I'm Mark Mills in the Bloomberg Radio Newsroom. With U.S. financial markets closed for the President's Day holiday, global stocks mostly rose Monday, with Shanghai's benchmark jumping over 2% after China's central bank rolled out support for the economy to offset effects from the coronavirus outbreak that has infected over 71,000 people globally. The FTSE 100 index in London gaining about 0.33%. The DAX in Germany up about 0.3%. The CSI 300 in China up 2.25%. The Nikkei fell 0.7% after Japan said GDP fell more than 6% last quarter, raising the specter of a recession in Japan. The World Trade Organization says global trade in goods will likely stay weak in coming months as disruptions from coronavirus in China staunch the movement of international commerce already slowed by tariffs tariffs and uncertainty. Walmart reports quarterly earnings in the week ahead. Bloomberg's Susanna Palmer has a preview.
Bloomberg Intelligence says a solid holiday season should translate to same-store sales growth for Walmart that outpaces many peers. That's even with the difficult comparison versus a year ago and a shorter selling period between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Analysts expect same-store sales, excluding fuel, will have risen 2.7% at Walmart U.S. and 1.1% at Sam's Club. Walmart expects e-commerce growth in the fourth quarter to have been the lowest of the year, though the company is on pace to deliver about 35% e-commerce growth for the full year. Susanna Palmer, Bloomberg Radio.
Elon Musk's SpaceX launched its fifth batch of 60 Starlink satellites Monday morning, another step toward Musk's vision of creating a space-based network to provide broadband service around the world. Gwynne Shotwell, SpaceX's president and chief operating officer, said earlier this month that SpaceX will likely spin out Starlink and sell shares to the public. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Mark Mills. This is Bloomberg.
You're listening to Bloomberg Best on Bloomberg Radio.
I'm Charlie Pellet. Dangote Group founder, president, and CEO Aliko Dangote is widely known to be the wealthiest man in Africa. The Nigerian billionaire went from buying and selling cement to becoming the largest cement manufacturer in sub-Saharan Africa. Dangote sat down with David Rubenstein, co-founder of the Carlyle Group and host of the Bloomberg television show Peer-to-Peer Conversations. Here he discusses the sense of duty he feels as the richest man in Africa to give back to society through initiatives to eradicate polio and improve access to health care in Africa.
Well, when they call you the wealthiest person in Africa, it comes with a lot of baggage. Of course, there are so many demands here and there where people now come up with so many different, demands. But it is good because I'd like to give back to the society.
So right now you are involved in many philanthropic endeavors in Africa and elsewhere. Let's go through some of them before we go to how you actually made all of this money. So recently you had an event in New York where we are now with Mo Ibrahim, also a wealthy African business person, and Bill Gates, in which you provided a fair amount of money for the African Center in New York, in Harlem. What is the African Center and why did you do that?
Well, we did the Africa Center idea started with, Chelsea Clinton, Hadil, Mo Ibrahim, and my daughter Halima. My daughter Halima joined them later, and we realized that, look, we need to set up this Africa Center. We need to make it a reality. First of all, for us to be able to project Africa in a better light, bringing Africa to the rest of the world. Especially when you look at, the of every September, we have the United Nations General Assembly where the entire world converges in New York. And what we want to do is to tell the real narrative of Africa and tell the rest of the world what Africa is all about. So this is now to do with policy, business, and culture. Because sometimes, especially, Americans, they don't really understand much about Africa. Somebody will say, okay, well, both you